Viewers, and welcome to the channel. My name is Shannon Rivkin. This week's video will be discussing the IMF predicted that net zero emissions targets for 2050 will be a boon for nickel, copper, cobalt and lithium. Of course, all commodities Australia is rich in, and potentially going to be great investment opportunities over the coming decades. This is from the IMF yesterday, talking about stated policy right now versus the net zero scenario, and talking about production of almost, I think the exact number is double for copper, quadruple for nickel, and almost 6 times current production for lithium and cobalt. Absolutely incredibly huge jumps in production, much of which of course is just not currently available to be ramped up. It's obviously going to rely on a lot more companies, and this will come obviously with price, because at the moment, obviously, at least in the short term, supply is pretty inelastic over the short term, but over the long term, certainly as we see higher prices, you'll start to see more and more companies develop projects that may have otherwise been uneconomic at lower prices, and you'll start to see that supply catch up. And whether, of course, it can catch up enough to keep a lid on prices remains the question. But certainly, if you look at the following chart, looking at the returns of BHP, which iron ore producer mainly, but certainly has exposure to nickel, which I think it's Australia's biggest nickel producer, and copper, and Oz Minerals, copper producer, IGO nickel, and Orocobre is lithium. So saying since 2019, not that much, but not that much going on. But as I've said, in recent times, I truly believe that the pandemic will be a catalyst for acceptance of climate change and an acceleration for towards net zero emissions. And you're starting to see this reflected. Yes, partly this is just simply gains in the prices of the underlying commodities, but I think you'll start to see a higher priced future priced into these stocks, well beyond the short term. Probably of the four, the least bullish I would say I am on, not necessarily on demand, but rather on the ability to make money out of it, is lithium. It's certainly a readily available commodity, not overly expensive, not overly capital intensive compared to some of the other commodities to develop a mine and start production. And you'd think that probably the most supply elastic over that long term. Whereas certainly copper, at least for the next half decade to decade, there's no big expected supply to come online. Rio's big Mongolian copper development has been fraught with issues, and obviously outside of the existing use case for copper, as that uptick comes from increased electric vehicle demand, you will start to see, I think, demand way outstrip supply, and certainly for the next 5 or 10 years, I would say copper probably would be my favorite commodity. Nickel, also, it's hard not to be bullish. IGO probably has a bright future ahead. Probably in the short term, a little bit more concerned about the policy of China in limiting their greenhouse gas emissions in the short term, and their cap on stainless steel production as well, which may be a little bit of a headwind for IGO, but certainly that won't make much of a dent in the long-term picture. Real risk, I think, to this, of course, technological change. We're talking about commodities that are used in current batteries, and obviously as technology develops and batteries may obviously change, the commodities that go into these batteries, or go into these long-term solutions, may ultimately change as well. As of today, that doesn't seem incredibly likely in the short term, but who knows? Who would have thought only 10 years ago we'd be talking about the sort of rate of change and acceptance of net zero that we're now seeing. So Australia, with an incredibly resource-rich stock exchange, and obviously as a country, certainly stands to benefit from this. The demand for these minerals and resources are going to be in the many trillions of dollars, and it's hard not to be bullish about the resources sector over the next 10 or 20 years. Anyway, that's it for this week's video. Thanks for tuning in. If you like the video, click like and subscribe, and I will be back next week.